So our next speaker, as we roll through these, is going to be Josh Birks, Managing Growth for a Robust Economy. Josh's experience is in economic planning. He's actually the Fort Collins City Economic Development Director.
Economic health.
Economic health, excuse me, not development, economic health. He'll give us some insights into the current job situation and help us think about how we can shape our economy as a community. So help me welcome Josh.
I like Clint, like to move around when I'm talking, so I'm going to be doing that. So, as Chris suggests, the question that I've been asked to speak to tonight is the one of jobs and how can we use jobs to continue to maintain a robust economy. I don't want to answer that question for you tonight. I want you guys to answer that later during the discussion. What I do want to do is provide some context that maybe can make our conversation later tonight that much more fruitful. And for me, context starts with a historical perspective. So that's where I'll begin my conversation. And I think there's some interesting information in that historical context that we can learn. Then I want to take a look at what's going on in our labor market right now in the county and in the city of Fort Collins. And then I want to leave you with some thinking about the challenges our community faces, not only in terms of where might jobs come from and what kinds of jobs, but also maybe an opportunity as well as to thinking about some of those numbers that we heard earlier from Terry. So we're going to start with the history. This is a hard chart to read. The numbers really don't matter. Focus on the colors. What you have is you have the percentage makeup of jobs in the United States from 1850 to 2010. Green represents farming. Blue-collar jobs. That makes it easy, right? Services is the kind of yellow in the middle. And then we have white collar, and other is the kind of piece you can't see at the bottom. So when I look at this chart, I come away with a couple of interesting observations. First, we've really seen an urbanization of the jobs in our country. And you can see that really as farming has gone down and white collar jobs, which are concentrated in urbanized areas, going up. And that really, that pretty much that transition was done in 1970, more or less. At the same time, we've seen this huge increase in white collar jobs and a steady rise in those. And that's been coupled by a rise in living standards, by and large, on average, as well as a rise in educational attainment. The interesting thing to me is more or less blue-collar jobs and service jobs have remained proportionally about the same amount of the economy since 1850, more or less. Not as much shift in those two categories as I would have thought. So think about this more as we talk later tonight about where can jobs come from and what kinds of jobs do we need in our community. So this is the same data, but now I'm showing it to you in the actual numbers of jobs. And you can see we've had a radical increase in the last, see, this goes back to, so this is 1970, 1960, right? It's really where that inflection point starts to take off in terms of the number of jobs. And so that also bodes well because it shows us that there's been a lot of job creation going on in our community. And this has been happening against a trend of automation within our industry, as well as rising educational levels. So it does mean that while automation has reduced the number of overall jobs that we've needed, that there are a variety of other jobs that are coming up around it, particularly in the white collar space, to support the robotics and other things that are creating rising productivity. It's interesting, I went to, tell a quick story here, I went to a presentation at a conference about 18 months ago in which they were comparing the cost of labor in China to the cost of labor in the United States. And when you look at straight hourly cost of labor, right, China's got us beat. But when you start to normalize that cost by productivity output per hour worked by US workers, I think they said we were $5 an hour off. And if you look at the chart, the data they were showing, China is on a steady rate of increase, and the United States on a productivity adjusted basis, particularly in manufacturing, is on a steady decrease for labor costs. So I think there's some opportunities in there, and that's what I wanted to take away from the historical context. I want to add a little bit more flavor to an observation Terry's already made about the flow of labor. This is from a labor study that my office commissioned in 2014 that looked at the county. What this tells us is we have about 38,000 folks that are outside of the county that come to the county every day for a job. About 79,000 of us live here in the county and work in the county. How many of the who here lives in Larimer County and works in Larimer County? Right, okay, substantial number of us. Interesting, and I think it's probably a new thing for Larimer County, is almost 45,000 people are leaving the county to find a job. So why is this? When we look at some of that data from the labor study a little bit further, it's interesting. There are more people who live in Fort Collins that per job make $40,000 a year or more than there are jobs paying that wage in Larimer County. So people are leaving to find higher wage jobs. When we look at the other end of that spectrum, jobs, and this isn't, don't get this confused with household income, right? Because there's usually more than one job per household. Good rule of thumb would be just double these numbers. But jobs where the salary is $15,000 a year or less, there's about the same amount of people who live in Fort Collins that make that salary as there are jobs available in that salary. So again, another piece of information for us to keep in mind as we look at challenges moving forward. I'll touch on this quickly. Terry's already told us 55% of folks, and this is a number for Fort Collins in particular, live and work in Fort Collins. That's a great number. I actually think it's a number we should be proud of, and I also think it's a number that we need to be thinking about as we look to the future. We have a great unemployment rate. It's actually so great, it's impeding our economy because it's not allowing for enough turnover. One of the other challenges that we have is we are highly educated. Who in the room has a bachelor's degree or better? Right? Well, only 23% of the jobs available in the county require that level of education. So maybe that's a reason why people are starting to get on the road and leave our community for jobs. You know, the vast majority of the jobs available right now in the county require, at most, a high school degree. So another way of looking at this, and this is really an opportunity, has anybody ever seen Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe? He can get on a rant, which I appreciate. I like people who are passionate. And he talks about, we don't have a lack of jobs, we have a lack of skilled workers. And some of the numbers out there are saying there's almost 16 million positions available, jobs available for people with middle skills and higher. Middle skills are some level of educational attainment past college, usually technical or vocational. So now let's think about this and the challenge that we have here in Fort Collins based on the context that's already been provided for us tonight by Terry and by Clint. So if we take that community vision that we developed together, collectively, that is represented by Plan Fort Collins, and you let the planners analyze how much capacity we have left in our community. They estimate between 67 and 86,000 population can be supported within the plan that we have. Now, those numbers are probably malleable in terms of the fact that they could go up or down depending on household size and so forth. But let's just focus on order of magnitude for a minute. If we want to focus on that 55% that I mentioned earlier, we're going to need between 40 and 50,000 jobs. Terry said 36, I think, thousand jobs earlier. I mean, we're going to need a lot of jobs. And I think that's actually an opportunity for us then to have a conversation to talk about where should those jobs come from and what opportunities do they create. So obviously, we have a growth management area in our community. Again, this is part of the comprehensive vision. So I think the challenge for us is not to think about the daunting task that would be creating 40,000 jobs in our community, but rather to think about the opportunity that something like having 40,000 jobs potentially occur within our community over the course of the next 25, 30 years can present. What kinds of things can we do collectively as a community? What can we move the needle on? Can we move the needle on climate action? Can we move it on water conservation? What opportunities are we afforded by having that ability to have additional jobs created? So, this is the city's vision for economic health. It's about a healthy and sustainable economy and one that reflects our community values. And so I didn't want to answer the question for you tonight. I want to be able to have that dialogue with you later, but I do want to stimulate you and get you thinking while you have some snacks in a few minutes before we come back to the table. So I'll leave you with a few questions. I've already talked about the opportunity that's embedded within that projected number of jobs. So I want you to think about that. What industries can the community grow? What industries should we grow? How can we as a community get involved in shaping those jobs in those industries? And finally, how can we collectively think about job creation to benefit the entire community? Thank you.